Today's episode is brought to you by Growing for Market magazine. For 31 years, Growing for Market magazine has been the source of practical ideas and information for direct market vegetable and flower growers. All articles are written by farmers who get their hands dirty and know what they're doing. If you do farmers markets, CSA, farm stand, pick your own, florist sales, or wholesaling, whether you're a commercial grower or want to grow like one, subscribe to Growing for Market for the nitty-gritty details of growing, marketing, and the business of small farming. Available as paper magazine and a digital download with thousands of archived articles available. Use the coupon code WORM, that's WORM, to get 25% off any subscription at growingformarket.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by RIMOL Greenhouses.
Whether it's tomatoes to market, flowers in the spring, or your family's harvest, growing in a greenhouse protected from the weather provides the right environment that you need for a harvest that you can count on. RIMOL Greenhouses are designed for durability and offer the quality that you need to grow productively year-round. Visit RIMOLGreenhouses.com to get a quote today.
If I may editorialize for a second, I own a RIMOL tunnel. I love it. We built it ourselves, and I really appreciated the quality of the tunnel as well as the customer service we received in the process, so make sure to check them out. All right, let's jam. Happy New Year, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to the No-Till Market Garden Podcast, Episode 10, Season 4. I am very excited about today's episode with Harper Kaufman of Two Roots Farm in the mountains of Colorado. Harper manages a 2-acre market garden there with 6 seasonal employees. And we talk about all of that: farming in the mountains, employee and task management, crop rotations, soil fertility management, using a farm stand for CSA overflow, and a whole lot else. I have been following Two Roots for quite a while now, but I want to give a special shout out to one of our Patreon members, Jared Kirst, who gave me the nudge to reach out to Harper. Speaking of the Patreon page, please consider signing up to be a patron at patreon.com/no-till-growers. There are discounts on things like merch, but also the Living Soil Handbook and future No-Till Growers events. And there will be some of those this year, I believe, but also at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs this week to Pear Tree Hill Farm, Steve Burr, Stephanie and Alex of Blue Berwyn Farm, Stephen Smith, Alberto Diaz, Ojai Roots, Scott Harris, Green Man, Veggie Cropper, Earth Care Farmer Jane Murner Cynical, Asia Smith, Scott Snodgrass, Andrew and Haley Keeler from Avoda Sustainable Acres, Jay Mill, Tony Lopez, Thomas Eliason, Judson Taylor, John Mills, Grown Up Farm, Jacob Arthur, Bob and Ann Patton of Hexhamshire Organics, Jared Kirst, Jay Armour, Dan Brisebois, C-Mac Small, Jay McCombs, Tim Baldwin, Esoterra Culinary, Steve Larson, Yannick LaPlante, and Jen Lawrence. Big thank you to everyone and anyone who supports the show however you can. Not interested in being a Patreon member, you can always kick us a few bucks at Venmo to @No-Till-Growers. That's always very appreciated. Okay, before we get going, one note about my audio. I forgot to turn on my good mic, which you hear me in now, because I am a professional. So you get the computer mic, which is really not so bad, but a little clippy. Anyway, let's get into this amazing show with Harper Kaufman of Two Roots Farm. Harper Kaufman, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jesse. It's so exciting to be here.
And it's exciting to have you. So let's start where we always start with this podcast. Tell us a little about where you're located and what kind of acreage you're working on there.
Awesome. Yeah. So I am in Basalt, Colorado. I have Two Roots Farm, and that's located on about 22 acres in Emma, some little historic town. It's not technically a town anymore. That's why I say Basalt. But yeah, in the mountains of Colorado, I grow vegetables, herbs, and flowers for CSA, farm stand, and local restaurants and a small local grocery store. And about on that 22 acres, 3 acres of that is fenced in with a wildlife fence, and that's where the garden is. So grow all the vegetables within that space, and the rest is in pasture, which has been used over the years for a mix of grazing animals, raising hay. Yeah.
Okay, so are you managing the rest of those 22 acres or just the 2 acres?
Managing the whole 22 acres. So I have a lease with Pickens County, which is the county I'm in. It's a really amazing situation. I have a 10-year lease that is able to renew every 5 years. So I'll actually be up for renewal next year. But I lease the whole area, just the 3 acres that actually grow the vegetables. So Two Roots Farm actually I started in 2016 on a different piece of land. For 2 years, we were about a 20-minute drive from where I am now, a little higher up in a drier area, and then moved to this property. I just finished my 4th season on this property. So it's been a huge blessing to be where I am. I have really a good water source, good, great land. It's a nice flat parcel where the garden is, and the pasture, I am still growing into it. I have a lot of dreams and ambitions for future projects because it is a great amount of space, and I am year by year making moves to grow the farm and expand into that land, but also add on enterprises and also support other farmers. This past year, I leased the front pasture to a friend of mine who started a livestock company, Marigold Livestock, and she leased that to graze her sheep and turkeys and meat chickens. So that was a complimentary, wonderful arrangement where she was able to raise her animals and sell them at my farm stand and my CSA pickups. And I love having the animals around. I think they're really beneficial for the land. And she does management intensive rotational grazing in a responsible manner that I loved. So it was a wonderful situation where I didn't have to take care of the animals, didn't have to add that onto my workload, but had them there working the land and helping improve the soil.
Very cool. Okay, so you mentioned, I want to talk a little bit about marketing because you mentioned CSA farm stand, local restaurants, and retail, and you didn't mention a farmer's market, so you're not doing a farmer's market?
Not anymore. For the first 4 years, I did farmers markets, but since COVID actually was kind of the final push to have me drop out of the farmers market, and I've been increasing the CSA a lot since then. So now I do. I have a weekly share and a every other week share, but together it's about 250 families in my CSA. And then once a week on Fridays, I have a farm stand on site. And then restaurant sales I've been kind of decreasing those over the years. It used to be a huge portion of sales, and now it's more around like 35% of my sales to restaurants, and that includes that one small local grocery store that I supply.
Very cool. Okay, so for the CSA, are you growing everything for the CSA, or are you buying anything in?
So I grow everything for it, but then I have add-ons at the actual pickup because I'm really lucky where I am. I'm pretty central in the valley here and right off of the highway, so it's accessible property. So I'm able to ask people to come to the farm, which means we don't actually pack boxes or anything. People come and we have it all set up, kind of like a farmer's market. And they get all the vegetables that, I've planned, I've grown. And then we'll have usually fruit for sale that I work with local growers to provide. And then I'll have meat producers that actually come and sell as though it were a farmer's market at my pickups and the farm stand as well. So my members have the chance to buy fruit and meat and eggs. At one point we had some dairy, hoping to get that back. But their CSA just includes the vegetables that I grow on my farm.
We've actually went the opposite direction. We stopped doing the CSA during COVID and started focusing more on, we actually did 1 year in 2020, we did the CSA, but we've slowly pulled back from the CSA and focused more on our farmers market. But the style of CSA that you described, where you're kind of having I'm assuming, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but you're probably like putting out all the vegetables, giving like an item list. You take 3 of this, 2 of that, 1 bunch here. Or is that kind of how you're doing it? That's always been my favorite way of doing a CSA, but is that kind of how you're doing it?
Yeah, we used to do it exactly like that, and now since COVID, when we were trying to eliminate, get space between people and try to make everyone feel comfortable. So we pack it up now. So instead of handing a list or having them choose, we have them bring bags so that they're reusing bags. They give those to us and we fill them up. There's usually options and add-ons if they want. So there's communication there, but it's really, they hand it to us and we're like, okay, here's your broccoli, here's your bunch of beets. I found this year something that I ended up relieving a lot of stress on my end, because in years past I was like, I grow a lot of herbs and I wanted to make it fun and exciting, but sometimes you grow funky things like tarragon or shiso or and I wanted people to have them, but I was automatically giving it to members in the past, and ended up I do a survey every year, and the survey just everyone was saying too many herbs, I don't know what to do with them. And so this year I just put all the herbs and like kind of funky items, like sometimes like even kohlrabi or fennel would be on that list as an options list. So then they could get as many as they wanted, because herbs were really easy for me to provide. And so people that loved herbs were so excited they could have, basil, tarragon, and rosemary and parsley and all the things they wanted every week. And the people that didn't have to stress about not getting, watching them rot on their counter. And anyway, so there's some option when they come to the pickup. But it is, for my staff, I lay it out, this is what everybody gets unless they say otherwise. And we do about 25 delivery shares. So those are packed up and those folks don't really get any options. But other than that, it's fairly flexible. I, also has a way to relieve stress as making sure to not have to, make sure I had 200 bunches of beets ready to go. I'll do sometimes beets or carrots, and people seem to like that. It's kind of overwhelming sometimes when they get all of the food. So there's a few members that are like, can I please have both? And we'll usually oblige. But most people are fine to choose, and it's actually been a huge, stress relief on my end of just not feeling like I need to have everything in the exact quantity ready to go.
Right, and I didn't even think about the COVID thing with the sort of U-pick version of the CSA.
Right.
But yeah, that's it. No, that makes a lot of sense, and that I like that adding just a little bit of flexibility in there for the customer probably fulfills that sort of desire from the customer standpoint of having a little bit of flexibility within a CSA, because that's always been the tension point, right? Is you have people who maybe complain because they can't pick and choose, or they get radishes and they don't like radishes, or whatever it is.
No, it was actually really interesting when we switched from they would come and fill their own bags, which I thought they would like. You get to pick out your tomato. We're not going to pick it for you. I thought that would be what people wanted. But when we switched, actually, so many people told me they much preferred having us pack the bags, that they would get stressed out having to weigh their salad mix or trying to understand how much they could take of one thing or another, that they much prefer having my staff do it and me do it for them. It requires more labor on our end, just having people at pickup, but I think it's been well worth it because, there's more interaction as well. And it's easier on our end because they don't actually really get to look at all the cauliflower heads and pick the best one. We're giving them, they're all good, but we're giving them without them having too much, stress over making sure they pick the right one to bring home to their family.
Maybe we can get some details on this farm stand. So you mentioned like having some additional items. Have you, like meat and possibly dairy again? Is there Like, have you learned anything in running a farm? Because I maybe selfishly, like my wife and I are getting ready to start a farm store on our property, and we're like kind of looking for models and things that people have learned. Like, is there anything that stands out there that you've kind of learned in the process of running a farm stand that has been really helpful?
Well, the farm stand has been through a few versions. Um, I think I'm still learning, and to be totally honest, in my mind, the farm stand kind of serves as like the final catch-all of my marketing plan. The CSA is where I spend most of my time planning and thinking, and advertising, and really a majority of my office work seems to be on CSA. Restaurants as well. I spend a lot of time working with chefs and orders and planning that out, making sure I have the right things. And then the farm stand seems to kind of just be like this beautiful space where, if we have it, we're put it out, and we got it. It's great. It's another outlet to try to move that. And even through the week, the way it lines out, I had CSA pickup on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I do restaurant deliveries and CSA deliveries on Wednesdays and Fridays. And the farm stand this year was on Friday. So it was kind of just the end of the week, getting everything out. And I didn't really do much planning or inventory. So I don't know if I'm the best model to copy after, but it's been a really cool thing for me in that way, because it's on site as well. So we're able to continue working in the background as it's going on. I started doing it every Friday last year when we dropped out of the farmer's market, and it certainly hasn't replaced the farmer's market. I think, we had a really great farmer's market. We would go to Aspen, which is about 30-minute drive from here. So it certainly doesn't replace that, but we're still, able to pull in about $2,000 on a Friday just being at the farm, which is, to me, incredible. So, but I guess what I've learned, to answer your actual question, through that process was getting people. So we used to do it. There's this really cute historic schoolhouse in front of my farm, and that's right off the highway, so you can see it from the highway. And so we used to set up there so you could see our tents, and it was kind of more, we did drive our truck and little mobile cooler over there and set up tents like a farmer's market. And that's how we got the word out. So I think that's what's made it possible. For this year, I actually moved it onto the farm. We put a little sign at the schoolhouse pointing people that way for those that knew. And I have a pretty extensive email list. I email every Thursday to remind them. So it's, I guess, learning to get the word out, learning to get that visibility was kind of the trickiest thing. Certainly wasn't that profitable the first couple years we did it, when we did it at the schoolhouse, and it was only in the shoulder season when we weren't at the farmer's market. But I guess for me now, it's I don't stress about it too much. I plan for the CSA, I plan for the restaurants, I plan for our food bank deliveries and things like that, and then the poor farm stand seems to just get whatever is left after that.
I like that perspective on it, that it's this kind of catch-all, and that it is also can be profitable, and it seems like it's maybe low maintenance. Would that be accurate?
It certainly feels low maintenance. I'm usually able to have one person there, and that's, we'll have like a little rush in the morning where there's 2 or 3 of us helping restock and talking to folks. But at this point, we really have regular customers, and it's pretty steady through the day, but chill. And yeah, I think part of it for me was, and this has been a huge lesson over the years in general, but just trying to relieve pressure and stress on myself. So, removing the expectations. I mean, I know that I have all these other crops, or I know that I have all these things that I'm doing, but I prioritize the CSA. So I'm not stressing myself out if, we don't have enough leeks to also have them at the farmer's market or the farm stand. and just kind of knowing that, those customers that come to the farm stand are really excited to have it there, really excited to meet us, to be there, to support us. And they're not gonna be that upset about me not having a certain crop, or if we run out of something. So I think just kind of taking the stress off myself has been something I'm working on, something that has been helpful, and just making it, I'm just going to let that farm stand be pretty relaxed. I don't go crazy on advertising. I don't go crazy on much, but it's working out really well.
That's great. Yeah, I like that approach of having it just be sort of a relaxed, not adding stress. Like your focus is on the CSA, and then it sounds like the restaurants, and then that kind of takes up the slack. Also, you mentioned the shoulder seasons, and I'm curious, like, what is your season there? What does it run? When does it start? When does it end?
Well, so my CSA, I start beginning of June, and I run through end of October. But I'm starting to plant outside mid-April. So I could push that. I have pushed that in the past. We used to start mid-May, but again, trying to relieve stress, realizing not that many people mattered. And those first 2 weeks were always so stressful to make sure I had enough food. And it was always ended up being a lot of leafy greens, and people weren't as excited as I wanted them to be. That I was able to have top soy and arugula, and so the CSA does, and the farmers market season around here is about the same. Starts in June and runs through mid-September for most of the markets. They say we have 100 frost-free days here. I think that's been, getting longer and longer. Seems like our springs have been warmer and earlier, and our falls have been warmer and later. So, and I do have some greenhouses I grow in as well, that in years past I've done more growing on the shoulder seasons, have experimented with spring CSAs and winter CSAs. But as of this year, I'm really trying to, kind of do the marathon sprint between June and October of having all my sales really focused in that time.
Okay, so you're not doing any winter production, or you're?
This year I'm not. This year I really decided to turn off the farm more than I ever have. In years past, grown in the greenhouses, had a lot of storage crops, and was turned really to restaurants because there's a lot of demand around here in the wintertime from restaurants. So that's definitely an area I could explore more, and I probably will. As of this year, I now have a barn that has, I would have an indoor space to wash vegetables, which, as you know, changes everything about winter production. But I just needed a break this year, so I'm taking it. I mulched everything in the greenhouses, and there's a little bit of kale and salad mix growing for myself, but I'm not. I sold a lot of my storage crops and was able to donate the rest. And I had made this decision early enough that I didn't have a ridiculous amount, so I really don't have much going on at all right now, which is a wild feeling.
That's great. I mean, it's great. I love that idea of just,
it is.
of actually getting to take the rest that we all say that we're going to take in the wintertime.
Yeah. And last winter, I said I was going to do that because I had the same feeling of just really wanting to. I really like to change things up. I love, around here we get to go skiing, and my family's close by, and all of a sudden having real time to spend with them. But last winter I had just enough going on, just enough growing, that it was stressful, and I had to be at the farm to take care of things and make sure water lines weren't freezing, and but the sales were so low that when I looked back at it this year, that wasn't because I thought I was giving myself a break, dialing it back, not trying to do too much, but really it just ended up being almost about the same amount of work with a lot less sales. So I went full pendulum the other way this winter. See how that goes.
Yeah, good. Well, can we talk? Maybe I want to jump to employees and employee management. What is what is your employee situation over the growing season?
Yeah. So last year I had 6 employees. They started. Well, 3 of them started beginning of March. The rest started beginning of May, and all of them worked through the end of October. And then one person is staying on with me just 1 day a week through the winter. She's going to be helping with planning and hiring and seed orders. And I'm kind of she also wanted kind of a window into the back end of everything we do. But yeah, so that's been growing. I started Two Roots Farm with my ex-partner, and it was just the 2 of us when we started. And then we had one part-time person that second year, and the third year we had 1 full-time person. 4th year, 2 full-time people, and then that 5th year was the year that we split up and I was running it on my own. So I ended up I wanted to have a lot of support and kind of changed up a lot of things of the model of how we were marketing and everything. So I was able to hire 5 people that summer and then 6 people last summer. And I think I will have 6 or maybe even 7 people this summer. And it's been something that has absolutely, I was terrified at first to have that responsibility of having more employees and training and communicating and organizing. But I've ended up really loving it. I found that it's something that might be more of a strength than me going out and just busting it out on my own. So we have one of my favorite things about working on the farm and the culture I'm trying to create with the folks that work with me. We lunch every day together. One person cooks lunch for everyone else. We rotate that responsibility. And I guess it's kind of funny. That's the first thing I want to talk about, but it really has defined how we build this, team feeling and how it's a real boost midday to have this amazing, people get really into it. Kind of almost ends up being sort of a competition of who's making the best lunches. And I always, challenge them to use as many vegetables as they can. That's another huge piece that I believe in is my employees get to take and eat whatever they want. We like to say, eat the best, sell the rest. The whole point for me, having this farm, the whole, the real joy is getting to, revel in that bounty and enjoy the fruits of our labor. So that's a big focus. I want them to be cooking with it. I want them to be eating it. And then they are able to talk about it with the customers too. They're like, oh yeah, Nick made this awesome, risotto or whatever. And it adds that, especially for the folks that don't, wouldn't maybe cook for themselves at home. They now are it's a challenge to be cooking for, sometimes we'll have volunteers or, people stop by. And so they're cooking for 6 to 8, sometimes even 10 people, all of a sudden you're a small chef, and it's, but it's been really, a really important element, I think, to the success of my employees' happiness. Just enjoying that. We take an hour, enjoy the meal, talk, take a break, refuel, and I think that really makes a difference. At least it does for me.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, the meal is so critical for, we have one, or not right now, but during the season we have one full-time employee. And yeah, that we make it a big point to like sit down, have a meal of our vegetables, like hang out, chat, give them time to like rest and relax before they get back to work. And I just feel like that keeps that person happy and healthy and gives them a chance to rest, and also us a chance to rest. And then we move on and finish the day out strong. I feel like that's so valuable. Is there anything else in like employee management that you feel like really stands out?
I've learned to really force myself to do monthly check-ins over the years of just realizing that having that space, that really honest communication, just asking people, giving them the chance to answer, maybe harder questions about how things are going and how they're feeling, has been really helpful. Because usually it's, simple things that you don't recognize, especially now that my crew's a little larger. I miss a lot. So I've really forced myself to sit down with everyone individually once a month and, basically just ask them how they are, how they're feeling, what's challenging them, what's been great, and how the schedule is working, how are their relationships with their coworkers. And usually they're like, it's great, it's fine, but I think even just having that opportunity goes a long way, people's morale. So I don't know. That's one thing that I did a little bit in the very beginning, but it was always like, July hits and you forget, and you don't, you think you're going to do it and you just never do. But I really, this year, finally forced myself to actually do it every month with everyone, and ended up able to solve a few issues before it really spiraled. And I think, I would just encourage that sort of communication, because it seems to go a long way.
I love that. So is it, on a technical note, is it something that you're scheduling with them? Are you saying like this time every Monday we're meeting, you're meeting with one person, like, or the first Monday of the month, or like, what does that look like? How do you do that?
No, it never seems to work out like that. It's more like, at the beginning, because I do a morning kind of review of what we're going to do the day or that week on Monday. Every day we do a little morning review. But it's more like the Monday of that week. I'm like, hey guys, I'm going to do check-ins. And that's how I phrase it. This is the check-in. I'm going to do check-ins this week. And then whenever, you know how the days are. It's always wild and hard to predict. So it's really just whenever I'm like, oh, okay. Oh, are you done harvesting the carrots? Oh, cool. We have a few minutes. Okay, here, let's go do our check-in right now. Kind of thing. So it's, I give them a little bit of time to, a warning, but it's not overly formal, which I think might be a good thing.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it doesn't feel like so much pressure on it. With the daily schedule, how are you managing tasks and stuff with your employees? Like, how do they get the tasks? Like, what's that process look like?
Yeah. In the past, I took Connor Crickmore's Never Sink farm course, and actually got the chance to tour his farm, and he inspired me to create task lists or task tickets. I used to do that. I don't do that anymore, but it helps me kind of at least frame how to present a task to an employee. And I really, his course, I learned a lot from his course, especially with employee management. But so now the training, I try to take a lot of time when I have a new person, training them on a task. But to be honest, at the beginning of the day, it's more, it really is day by day. So we usually start the day with harvest, and I'm just kind of delegating the first few crops, but I have a whole list. So it's really then whoever finishes first, they get to choose the next crop to go to. I had some people that were more specialized, only certain people really used the quick cut greens harvester, for example, or certain people were just really fast at or really enjoyed bunching herbs, and they tended to be the people going there. But I guess I wish I had a better answer for you as far as like, oh, I have this wonderful schedule or spreadsheet or something, but it's really like we start the day, I delegate the first few tasks, and then as the day goes on, depending on who's free and available, we move from there. Knowing that I'm also like observing my employees, knowing their strengths, and certain people I'll pull aside for certain tasks, knowing that they might be more prepared for that than someone else, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And then with it being seasonal work, are these employees that are coming back year after year? Is it kind of a new bunch every year? How's that been?
Yeah. Well, I've had one girl, Emma. She's worked for me for 3 years in a row. And last year I had 2 other returning employees, so 3 returning of the 6. And this year I'll have 3 returning again of the probably 6. And so it's changing, a bit. We seem to have new people each year, but also have some consistency. So one of the people coming back this year, it'll be his 3rd season. The other 2 girls were the 2 new girls from last year, so they'll be their 2nd season. And unfortunately, Emma will not be returning because she's starting her own homestead, small farm in a town not too far away. So we're very excited for her, but sad to lose her. So it's a kind of a combo. I'm always really, really excited to have people come back. That's certainly been a huge asset to have returning employees.
Right. And there's also, I think about, mountain culture. Like I was born in Colorado. I actually lived in, and my mom moved us to Aspen for a year because she was like kind of ski bummy, which I loved. But there's kind of a little bit of a culture of that, of like you do sort of seasonal work in the summer, and then you kind of do the ski slopes in the winter, and then you go back to seasonal work in the summer. It seems like the kind of place that could work, like that makes it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. It lends itself to that pretty nicely. That there's work to be found in the winter that is seasonal.
Hey, you all, just jumping in here real quick to get a word from our show sponsors. Today's episode is also brought to you by Tilth Soil. Tilth Soil, this Cleveland, Ohio-based company, is producing some of the highest quality soil mixes out there. That's why I included their work in my book and use their products on my farm. This is true. Tilth Soil makes composts and potting mixes approved for use in certified organic operations like my own. Their living compost is made from food waste they haul and compost themselves, and it is the cornerstone of all of their blends. Tilth Soils take regenerative and organic growing to a new level. For more information on their products, including bulk ordering and their nationwide shipping, visit www.tilthsoil.com. All right, back to the show. Well, yeah, let's talk about production a little bit. I know, can you describe a little bit, let's start with like crop rotations and stuff. I know you'd mentioned that to me before we started recording, like maybe talk about how you set up your fields and a little bit about rotations and those sorts of things.
I have the field set up in blocks that are all, luckily, when I started the farm on a different property, we learned a lot about just how we wanted to think about crop rotation and planning. So when we got to this new, the property I'm at now, it was a really awesome opportunity to design it exactly as we wanted. It was a blank canvas, empty pasture. So now I have it set up in blocks of 16 bed, 100-foot beds. And so it makes my crop rotation simpler, more simple, because I really have that obvious break in the blocks. Years past, I would really detailed line out every single bed and try to make a really extensive plan, which I think was an important exercise that still helped me. But now I do it much more general, because every year after making that really detailed, gorgeous plan, knowing that it never went according to plan. I now have more of a block system where I kind of have, greens, roots, and alliums, and I kind of line it out more that way, so it's a more general crop plan, but it's based a lot more on planting time and harvest time than it is truly on crop family. And for management, it works really, really well, and as the years go on, we'll see if it works well for soil health and all of those things. But as of now, it seems to be working very well. So that I'm focusing more on when things are going in the ground and when they're coming out of the ground than I am exactly on making sure that one bed does not receive, lettuce after lettuce. I allow that now in one season, and then hope that, in that greens block, that doesn't become a greens block next year. The hope is that that's now, maybe a legume or squash block or something, so that there's a rotation year to year. But I've actually kind of allowed myself to plant, even I'll do, turnips and then plant radishes, or, I will even follow a brassica with a brassica in the same season. And I've had success so far. So it's more looking at when things are coming out of the ground so that I don't have beds lying empty for long periods of time, and I'm able to turn those beds over quickly and really be able to maximize the space and not have bare soil exposed for ideally any time at all.
Are you certified organic?
I'm not. I actually, Christian, my ex-partner, went through the process of getting us almost there. So I knew enough to watch how exhaustive it really was, but didn't end up following through on it. My customer base just doesn't seem to mind so much. And it seemed like a lot of work that kind of limited, what I was able to, or how I was doing things and what I was growing and what I was able to use. Although I still use all organic methods, and I don't really use any. I try to be chemical free, so I'm not using really even Omni certified, product herbicides, pesticides, or a lot of the even amendments and things. But I just felt like the actual certification wasn't necessarily worth all of the work when I don't have customers really asking for it.
Right. No, I mean, I think that's definitely always the way to evaluate it, is whether or not it actually is going to bring value, because it's a lot of work. I go back and forth with my wife all the time on whether or not it's necessary for us because of the amount of work.
Yeah. I have some regret there, because I would love to be part of that movement, part of that statistic, because I do think it's an important step in the right direction. But ultimately, I just felt it wasn't quite worth the work for me at this time. Anyhow, we'll see as these things go, as things change.
You mentioned like the OMRI, amendments and that sort of stuff, and not really using many of those. What does your fertility program look like? Are you doing much cover cropping too? Is that part of it?
Yeah. This past year, I actually have turned to cover cropping much more than in the past, and I'm excited to kind of see how that plays out this coming year, because I planted more this fall than I ever have. So it'll be an interesting spring trying to manage that with my crop rotation, but I'm really excited about it. You do some cover cropping, but the past few years I've relied really heavily on compost, and I do use some organic soil amendments as well. But I'm trying to I'm trying to educate myself a lot more on soil health, and starting to kind of recognized the importance of biology really over chemistry. And I think I've been focusing mentally, or at least believing a lot more in chemistry in the past and thinking about soil that way. And I'm kind of reframing things for myself, and trying to, and I'm still learning. I'm still trying to realize what exactly that'll mean for my fertility program, but that's kind of the mental switch I'm going through right now. So I'm trying to, and that's why I think why I turned to cover crops a little more this year, was worrying more now about keeping the soil alive, keeping roots growing, keeping the organisms fed and happy, than worrying about, my nitrogen to carbon ratios and stressing about phosphorus overload. Although I know those things are also important, I'm trying to work out more. Maybe it's more for me a management question of how am I handling the soil organisms, and how am I keeping that food web fed and alive. So this year I think I'll be maybe even steering away from soil amendments for the time being, because I don't feel very confident. I feel like in years past I've made soil amendment mixes and not had real confidence that that was what my soil needed. And I also, because of the way I've been doing crop rotation, which isn't very organized in the way that other farmers do it, by family, that I'm not special amending the beds. They're all getting a blanket mix, which I guess I've just got nervous after this year of I think I could be screwing things up a little more than I'm helping. So this year I think my plan will be to work more with cover crops, and use this. I have a guy, I'm really lucky, he's about an hour away, makes really wonderful compost. So I'll be using his compost and cover crops. And at this moment, I feel like I might even take a step back from soil amendments and see how the soil responds, and see how the soil tests respond as well. It's kind of my experimental learning this year.
On the technical level, on the cover crops, what cover crops are you using? Are you doing winter cover crops? Because I know you probably have a lot of snowpack too. Is it mostly just kind of quick summer mixes? What's your approach there?
Yeah, doing a little bit of both. There is a lot of snow here. And so, but I've had success having winter rye, come back in the spring. And so I have a few different mixes out in the field right now. Some that I expect to be winter killed, and some that I'm hoping will come back in the spring, and be, hopefully able to grow through into kind of late spring was my hope there. And then I do some quick turnover, buckwheat and those sorts of things in the middle of the summer, when I'm able to. But I think I'm hoping that the winter kill mixes and the overwintering mixes work out as I hoped, because I think that'll help a lot with my early spring. Well, my hope is that especially the overwintering mixes will help out in the early spring, when all of a sudden every bed needs attention and cultivation and covering. I'm hoping that those can be my blocks that I end up planting later in the summer, or later in the spring at least. But yeah, so I'm still experimenting with all of it, and try to plant a pretty diverse mix when I do this year at least. I put down a pretty diverse mix of seeds, whereas in the past I've done more just one crop at a time, trying to learn about cover crops and about how those different things behave in the garden. This year's more of a mix, so I'll let you know in the spring.
Great, that's great. Okay, so You have snowfall, you have this high altitude. What did you say? I think you told me it was 6,500 feet. Um, you have pretty cold winters, intense sunlight. Can you talk about some of the advantages and maybe, disadvantages?
I think one of the big advantages is, well, in my mind, is that it's dry. So while that's challenging for irrigation and keeping things watered, because I have a pretty good water source and a nice irrigation setup, I've actually really enjoyed that it's dry because I'm very much in control of the soil moisture. So I don't have the issues of, you know, not being able to get into the soil. I almost never have that. I mean, unless it's self-imposed or like the few times where we've had a big rainstorm, I really am able to, control the soil moisture and work the soil when I need. We definitely have some rainstorms, so that's not always true, but it's not like the Northeast or the South or, the Northwest where you're constantly working around Mother Nature and soil moisture and things. And it also reduces, I think, disease issues and certain pest issues because it's dry. That I think ends up being an advantage in my mind. As well as the season, I enjoy that it's so seasonal here. We get 4 true seasons, and I love that change. And the snow really forces me to stop with my outdoor production. But we have such great sunlight that you really can have successful winter growth in greenhouses and, shoulder seasons. If you can add that heat, and if you can maybe add a little more light units, you can do some great indoor growing here too. So I think that's a cool advantage of being here. And it's a beautiful place to be too. So that doesn't hurt.
And with the indoor growing, are you doing tomatoes and stuff?
Yeah, my tomatoes and some cucumbers, and every year change it up a little bit. Sometimes, eggplant and peppers, basil. Those are the crops that are grown indoors through the summer. And then in the winter, it would be more, I'm not doing it right now, but in years past, it's been more greens and quick growing roots and things like that. Because I have one heated tunnel, but the other is not heated. So, and I'm building a new one this spring, which I think will be heated, and that'll allow me to do a lot more next winter, which I'm excited to. Yeah, that it'll again be kind of every year feels like an experiment, but I'll be able to grow a lot more diversity having that extra space.
Yeah. So can you do things like tomatoes and cucumbers in the unheated greenhouses, or is the heat kind of required for that?
Yeah, I do tomatoes and cucumbers in the unheated one as well, but they are planted a little later, so they're kind of a second succession, if you will, in that unheated greenhouse, because it really doesn't stay warm enough in there until mid-May for me to plant in there. So it's not a huge jump on the time, but it does just keep them a lot happier, protected, all the advantages of growing indoors. But the heated tunnel, I'm able to, get those tomatoes and peppers and cucumbers in the ground quite a bit earlier and get those early season crops.
With those tomatoes, are you having to grow determinants, or can you grow indeterminates as well?
Yeah, I grow almost all indeterminates actually. Yeah. And it's worked out. It's been working out well. I, used to stress about it quite a bit and try to push it into earlier in the season, and push it longer in the season when I was doing farmers markets, and it felt, really important to have the tomatoes as early as possible and as late as possible. And now that I have kind of started focusing more on having diversity of crops. And with my CSA, they're a little more forgiving of, they want to have really, really good tomatoes while they're in season, but they're not yelling at me if it's not every single week of the CSA. So it makes it, I don't push that season quite as hard as I probably could. But allowing my spring greenhouse crops to come to maturity, I'm usually interplanting the tomatoes into those crops, and then I will pull the tomatoes early enough if I'm planting my winter greens out.
And then are there, you mentioned the farmer's market being early to the farmer's market with produce. Is there a lot of competition in that area in terms of other farmers? Like what's the density of market gardeners in that area?
Yeah, it's an interesting setup here. So exactly where I am, I feel there is not much, there's not many other growers there, although it every year is expanding, and there's a lot of activity and a lot of excitement around local food here. But as far as people really cranking and producing, there's not that many farms in the actual valley, but we're pretty close to, Palisade and the North Fork Valley that have longer growing seasons and a lot more producers. And those folks come to our markets because they're in places where there are so many producers and there's really not much of a market where they are. So they are driving a lot further, 2, even 3 hours to get to our markets. But at the actual farmers market, there's quite a few producers, and they'll have a lot of crops that we can't grow in the valley here. So yeah, it's an interesting, exactly where I am, I feel like very limited competition. But at the actual market, then as far as sourcing locally, there's quite a bit of availability, and seems to be getting better every year.
Right, which is there's also the challenge, I guess, of land access for that area. I know that land is incredibly expensive, and you've got this beautiful opportunity to lease this land from the county, which is super cool. I feel like a lot of times when I'm talking to people in the mountains or in like more expensive areas like that there's always these really interesting sort of lease agreements.
Yeah, I think that's certainly like the number one challenge here. I mean, unless you inherit land, I'm not sure how you would make the numbers work. And it's so expensive, and the cost of living here is really expensive as well. So I feel very fortunate to have the lease that I do, and the other farmers that I know, there's all the other farmers that are doing similar things to me are also have leases, if not with the county as well. They are, or from families and landowners that are supportive of what they're trying to do, and that's how we started too, leasing land from friends that were very supportive. But it's challenging in that way. That it seems there's kind of two models here. I feel people are either a nonprofit, which is also very prolific here. We have a lot of farming and food nonprofits that I feel like are able to make it work, by working really hard to generate donations and support, or they're, found some kind of alternative land opportunity, leasing land somehow at an affordable rate. And that's kind of the only way that it seems to be able to work here. It is also kind of unique and special that there is a lot of farmland around us. So landowners are turning more and more to like, hey, that'd be cool to have a farm here. And I think opportunities are popping up around here more and more, with landowners that are supportive of the idea. And so farmers that are willing to work with that and to lease land, I think could have a lot of success here.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I'm curious about with you is that you're one of the few farmers I've spoken with. Well, I mean, there's certainly some on the podcast, but that are doing it by themselves. Are there challenges and possibly advantages within that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I I feel I certainly need to add the caveat that I didn't start it by myself, um, and I owe so much to my ex-partner for all the, we really built this together. But now running it on my own, I I think there's been, well, one of the biggest advantages I've found is, when the decision needs to be made, I get to just make the decision and then it's done, which has been made things a lot faster on like big decisions. But it is a huge challenge on the other end of that, of just not really having that sounding board as much to, someone that's equally invested to talk things through and to really sort through ideas. But I think having one point person for my employees has been a huge advantage. I think, the communication's more streamlined, the expectations are more clear, and, just having, I know what is most important to me, and so I'm able to communicate that and to my employees, and I think that just really helps clear things up, because when you have multiple people running the show and everyone has different pieces that they really prioritize or care about, or different ways of doing things, it can add some stress and some confusion. So that's been kind of an advantage, but also the challenge there is really trying to make sure you're identifying what you want, what matters to you, and how to communicate that, and how to I'm trying to also working hard to remain open to new ideas to change, because I don't have that pressure from someone, equally invested in the farm anymore to do different things, or to try certain things, or to, challenge me on how I'm running things. So I think I need to be, extra careful to listen to my employees, to be continuing my education, and to be open to trying new things. That's been something I'm really pushing myself to make sure I'm not getting stuck in, the rut of how I like to do things and what I'm comfortable with, because that's easy to do.
Right. Well, Harper Kaufman, this has been such an excellent conversation. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah, thank you, Jesse. I hope your listeners got some value out of it, and I'm very honored to be a part of this community. Thanks for all the work you do and all the information you help share. It's invaluable to all of us. So thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome. All right, if you enjoyed that episode, make sure to follow Two Roots Farm and Harper on Instagram and all the places. We will hook it up with the links in the show notes. Also, you can support our work by picking up a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at no-tillgrowers.com. Proceeds from that specific sale at no-tillgrowers.com go to making you more free content. Venmo us some money if you'd like to at no-tillgrowers. That works too. And of course, patreon.com/no-tillgrowers. That is always a great one. I just can't say enough about how much we appreciate you all for your support. It is so amazing. Subscribe to this podcast wherever you are getting it and leave a review. But this week, all reviews must be written to the tune of Auld Lang Syne, because that's how I'm going to read them. Today's episode was brought to you in part by a grant from Southern SARE. Big thanks to Jackson Roulette for all his work, Josh Satin for his video guidance, Willie Breeding for the theme music, and of course my amazing wife Hannah Crabtree for all that she does behind the scenes. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you next week. Bye. This is a good podcast, but the music's kind of weird.